get you to react to him. Here is what Ted Cruz said, directing it to you.
As the Democrats played a budgetary trick, which is they took $400 billion in discretionary spending and they shifted it to mandatory. And the reason they did that is they want to spend $400 billion more discretionary funds on completely unrelated matters. And so it's just part of the out-of-control spending from the left. And
before I get you to respond, I mean, the unrelated matters is just not true. This money, even when you create the bigger pool, still only can be spent on veterans. But anyway, go ahead.
That's correct.
Yes.
Well, the difference between mandatory and discretionary is that's just a word salad that he's spewing into his coffee cup on his way to God knows where. As veterans sit in Washington, D.C. in the sweltering heat, demanding that they pass this legislation that they've been fighting for 15 years. Look, anybody can say anything. You know, we could say Elvis Presley is still alive, but at some point we all have to live in reality. And what he is saying is just factually incorrect. Yeah. The bill that Ted Cruz voted yes on had the exact same funding provisions as the bill he voted no on. It's the exact same bill. None of this makes any sense.
You have thrown yourself in the middle of it on a couple of different bills. How much more cynical are you now, if that's possible?
It's a pretty difficult place to see how it works because they're so insulated and isolated from the real people whose lives are affected by these various provisions. Look, you know, a government by the people, of the people, yes. But the clause they always seem to forget is for the people, for them. And these are real people. I've been with them for 4 years fighting through this. I've seen them through their defeats and their victories. But here's the other thing, Chuck. I've seen them die. We've had veterans who were advocates alongside us, Sergeant Wesley Blatt, Captain Kate Hendricks Thomas, who died while fighting for this bill, sick, utterly incapacitated by the injustices and the illnesses that they've been dealing with. Yeah. And yet they decided to spend this last precious times of their life fighting so that the other men and women that they were brothers and sisters with in the military never have to go through this. And so the outrageousness of their inability to see the human toll that their parliamentary, and I'm trying desperatly not to curse.
I hear you. I appreciate that.
I'm on a respectable network, I believe. This is probably
the FCC does have a little
nationally televised. So I'm desperately trying not to curse. But the injustice that is being done is so outrageous, and the reasons for it so utterly unrelated to any of the funding or any of the other things. You know what this is, Chuck? They basically said to veterans on June 16th, the 15-year fight that you never should have had to go through to get the health care and benefits that you earned from your sacrifice and service in the defense of this country, here it is. And then a month later, they went, April Fools. It's cruel.
By now, you know that the Republicans voted against the PACT Act, which would have expanded VA healthcare eligibility to millions of veterans suffering from illnesses related to burn pit exposure. Republicans opposed it as retaliation for Manchin and Schumer releasing a reconciliation package called the Inflation Reduction Act, because, you see, Republicans don't think that Democrats have the inherent right to govern despite having majorities in the House, the Senate, and the White House. They know that if Democrats fix things, Republicans won't be able to attack them for being broken. Now, I've mentioned this in past videos, but so long as Republicans like Ted Cruz continue making these false claims about why they oppose the PACT Act, I'll continue to explain why they're lying. They claim that Democrats changed the bill in the time between the Senate first passing it and this week when it actually came up for a vote. Here's the only change. One single sentence was removed regarding taxable benefits. Here's that sentence right here. That's it. If you compare the two versions, that is quite literally the only change. And if any Republicans are claiming that something else was changed, tell them to show you where. Republicans claim that a budget gimmick was added. Again, no, nothing was added. One single sentence was taken out regarding tax implications. If they're trying to convince you that Democrats stuck in a budget gimmick, again, tell them to show you where. Republicans claim that funds could be used for non-veteran issues. Dead wrong. Here's where it explains exactly what the funding must be used for in black and white. Quote, 1. The delivery of veterans health care associated with exposure to environmental hazards in the active military. 2. Any expenses incident to the delivery of veterans health care and benefits associated with exposure to environmental hazards in the active military. And 3. Medical and other research relating to exposure to environmental hazards. That's it. It's right there in the bill that the funding is limited to only these things. So when Republicans claim the Democrats will be able to siphon off these funds for unrelated projects, you should probably know that they're lying through their teeth. Now, it would be possible that if the VA moved certain expenditures from the discretionary fund into the mandatory fund, that there would be money in the discretionary fund that could be allocated elsewhere. But guess who has to approve that? Congress. So when these Republicans say that this money will be moved, it would quite literally have to be with their own consent. That's the only way it happens. So if the VA wanted to move any funding from one fund to another, those very Republicans pretending they have no agency here are literally the people who have all the agency here. In reality, the Republicans were butthurt the Democrats finally managed to release a reconciliation bill that looks like it'll have enough support to pass. And Republicans were so desperate to deprive them of a win that they went scorched earth and tried blocking everything. Everything, including a bill protecting our own country's sick veterans. And while they didn't care about the veterans, they do care about the backlash. And so now they're desperately scrambling to blame it on some procedural issue, knowing full well that their goal is to obfuscate the facts and confuse people. The problem is that Jon Stewart and many others have no intention of letting them get away with their lies. I should note too that beyond just the political implications here, it is just the peak of Republican cruelty that they are willing to throw a political temper tantrum on a bill that is the only lifeline for God knows how many American veterans who are dying right now. They don't have the luxury of waiting until this bill comes back up for a vote when Republicans feel like allowing it. Their cancer isn't going to wait until the next session. Their cancer isn't going to wait until a recess. These people are getting sicker and they need treatment now. So for these senators to decide that this is a good time to oppose this bill because they wanted to score some cheap political win tells you exactly who they are. And so I hope two things will come of this. First, I hope that Republicans who are getting absolutely demolished by the optics of voting against veterans and then trying to confuse everyone with meaningless and false word salad about mandatory versus discretionary spending realizes what a shitstorm they've created for themselves, that they grow the fuck up, that they put their big boy pants on, and that they vote for this bill to get these vets the funding that they deserve. At a bare minimum, this should be their only priority right now to at least try and undo some of the wholly unnecessary damage that they've already inflicted upon these people. And second, I hope that Americans look at this and realize that all of the platitudes that Republicans have been hiding behind for decades and decades have been nothing but empty rhetoric. Just to give a few examples, Republicans crow about their support for the troops, only to then vote against funding for veterans suffering from illnesses related to burn pit exposures. Their support for the police, only to vote against rewarding congressional gold medals to officers who responded on January 6th. Their support for family values, only to then coddle guys accused of affairs, sexual assault, child sex trafficking, and pedophilia. Their support for states' rights, only to support the Texas lawsuit seeking to overturn the election results in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin because they didn't like the outcome there. Their support for freedom of speech, only to ban books in schools across the country. Republicans claim to hate inflation and then vow to block a reconciliation package intended to reduce inflation. They claim to hate China and then whip votes against the CHIPS Act, which would make us competitive with China. They claim to hate high gas prices and then, amid record profits from oil companies, vote against anti-price gouging legislation. The fact is that Republicans don't care about inflation or the police or China or family values or states' rights or high gas prices or children's safety or censorship, and certainly not about our veterans. They only care about having talking points to attack Democrats with. They showed that with their vote on this bill and with everything else they've done in the last few years. So the next time one of these clowns stands up and professes his admiration or deference for our troops or the police or our children or whatever else the talking point of the day is, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do, because they'll expose themselves as the morally bankrupt partisan hacks that they are every single time. Before you go, couple things. First, if you want to support my work, the best way is to subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. And second, if you want to see and hear more from me, check out my website, briantylercohen.com. That way you can get links to my podcast, merchandise, ways to donate to voting rights organizations, and so much more. The thumbnail is also right here on the screen, so go check it out. And as always, thank you so much for watching.